The inclusion of the often maligned unincorporated construction state efficiency penalty has actually done quite a lot for Victoria 3. Though it is unpopular on the surface, it does provide a wealth of unique gameplay that wasn't particularly important in earlier versions of the game. Today, in patch 198, Victoria 3's primary cultures are more important than they have ever been as a result. Faster incorporation times are often cited as the #1 goal for certain routes of conquest and expansion, which is, of course, dictated by the cultural traits of your country's primary culture. In this video, we will be going through 5 countries who have some of the best starting culture combinations in Victoria 3, allowing them to easily expand across the world without much issue. However, before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank my boys Radicals in Paris and Connor Vic 3 for setting me straight on what should and should not be included on this list. I'd also like to thank Russian Patel for rejoining my Patreon and YouTube Premium membership program. Seriously, all of you guys are kings for helping me keep the lights on. Anyhow, this intro has gone on long enough. Let's get into the video. I bet you're probably wondering how Qing of all countries managed to end up on this list. And honestly, were it not for some influencing from some people in my Discord, I probably would have overlooked this one entirely myself. Yet, here we are. The Han culture gives Great Qing high acceptance to every single member of the Sinosphere and East Asian heritage. That means that Koreans and Japanese people in particular have a very high +60 base acceptance to begin with. The Manchu culture, meanwhile, gives Great Qing high acceptance with other North Asian heritage peoples such as the Mongolians, Yakutians, and Siberians. While it's not exactly the world's largest spread for culture, it is enough to make this list merely because it's paired up with the Han, which gives them the ultra-powerful East Asian heritage. I am going to go on record to state that I do not think that the North Asian heritage as particularly important of the grand scheme of things. Although they do appear to count for around 10 million population, the problem with this type of population is that it's already owned by somebody large enough to actually protect it. That means that either Russia or Great Qing will already own the majority of the North Asian heritage peoples, and if Qing wants to make full use of the North Asian heritage acceptance, they will have to make incursions into Russia to take pieces of Siberia. Yes, it is impossible to overlook just how powerful the East Asian heritage given to the Han is. Once more, you can easily make incursions into Japan for a very sizable population and resource boost, and you will immediately be able to make full use of those populations with a 5-year incorporation timer. Not half bad if you do plan on playing a very wide China overall. You will also be able to aim southwards into Vietnam for a minimum +40 acceptance, since, believe it or not, Vietnamese count as part of the Sinosphere themselves. Just note that you can expect a 10-year incorporation timer through this path, and Siam and their puppets do not count as Sinosphere, which means you will probably be looking at a very long incorporation timer for them. What culture dwarfs the East Asian heritage in terms of usability? Why the European heritage, of course. European heritage, while it doesn't cover the largest population in the game, it does cover the absolute most number of states, dwarfing pretty much every other culture by at least double the amount. Don't forget, European heritage covers 3 continents, while the second largest, which would be African, only counts for 1 continent. Thus, is it any wonder that I'd give the Philippines a higher ranking than the lofty Qing? Filipino culture counts towards the Southeast Asian heritage, which covers pretty much every single state in the Indonesian region. You will find accepted populations across Borneo, Sumatra, Java, and perhaps even more helpful, Indochina. Of course, while the number of populations that you get access to aren't quite as numerous as the East Asian cultures would be, they are far easier to conquer overall, and the number of states and resources that you can pick up will quickly add up over time. Then there's the Spanish culture. My goodness, This is low-key one of the better cultures in the game because of how much coverage you get just from it alone. European heritage alone will net you 5-year timers across North America, South America, and Europe, but the extra Hispanosphere trait makes pretty much all of Central and South America highly accepted upon conquest, even if they aren't European heritage. You would probably think this wouldn't matter much because of how difficult it can be to break into this part of the world, right? Well, what if I told you that there are 2 exceptionally simplistic methods to break into North and South America? North American access is simplified by waiting for Central America to break apart, then attacking Los Altos, a country that can barely defend itself. You can then use Los Altos to springboard your invasion into Mexico at your leisure. For South America, you have Uruguay, which is never protected by any great powers, giving you a simple path towards Argentina and Brazil. It is true, however, that the amount of population that you can receive from these cultures isn't particularly high. However, what is particularly high is the amount of gold that you can get from conquering states in Mexico, Brunei, and South America. Never discount the power of European heritage and the ease of conquest in these regions. Speaking of easy conquest, is there any easier conquest in this game than going through Africa? Part of the reason why I'm about to rank the following culture combinations so high is not only for the utility and spread of the culture, but the ease of which they can make use of it. A great cultural spread won't mean so much if you can't actually conquer the land you're intending to take, will it? That might be why Harar and its rather epic wombo combo of Somali and Amhara cultures are located on this list, and relatively high at that. While it's true, Amhara does not give you anything particularly special when it comes to cultural traits, there is a unique aspect to the Amharan culture that elevates it well above other cultures in this game. Amharan cultures get access to the Outlaw Prince event, which gives you a monarch by the name of Teodros that can be turned into a general. When he is made into a general, he gets a decent +5 offense and +5 defense. Yeah, it's not as good as his earlier versions where he had a +30 offense, but it should still be good enough to take Ethiopia and Somalia without too much of an issue. However, it is also coupled with the Somalian culture with its Arab-speaking cultural trait that allows you to not only conquer Egypt, but to incorporate it twice as fast as the other African cultures in this game, putting you in the driver's seat for African-wide conquest with relative ease. It would be very prudent to make use of those cultural bonuses as fast as possible though. The longer a game goes on, the more likely it is that great powers such as Britain and France will start intervening on what goes on in Africa. It's just a shame about the Teodros nerf. You would have been able to handle yourself against the big dogs until they got shrapnel artillery back in those days. Well now, not 1, but 2 African placements on this top 5 list? Surely by now you must assume I have a big bias towards the African culture spread. Well, you're not wrong. I rate African culture coverage on par with East Asian and European heritages simply because of how simplistic it is to conquer pieces of Africa in the early game, giving you a massive boost over the competition if you do so. There is something exceptionally useful about being able to incorporate each and every single state in Africa at 5 years or less, and unfortunately to date, there is only one country in the entire game that can actually do that. Darfur has the classic East African culture under the Fur. This alone will give you a beefy +60 acceptance upon every single state below the Sahara and the Nile. You can even take every single state in Niger, Ethiopia, and South Africa, and every single population will feel blessed to be part of your empire. Yet at the same time, Darfur also has access to the Bedouin culture, which effectively gives you the same +60 acceptance as before, except it's for every single state above the Sahara and the Nile. From Morocco to Egypt, and even a sizable chunk of the Arabian Peninsula and Persian Gulf, you will find people elated to be part of your empire should you decide to spread across the land by sword. That does mean that Darfur, despite its rather difficult and lofty beginning, is actually secretly an insane powerhouse that can overtake an entire continent without breaking a sweat, should they escape their Central African starting position, that is. Once more, we find a nearly impossible start on this list, showcasing the virtues of pushing through pain and suffering to come out on the other side as a literal conquering hero with huge, widespread benefits in the process. Caucasian Imamate is a country that most people would scoff at. In fact, the only real way to play this country is to take advantage of Persia's desire to conquer Herat by convincing them to let you keep Herat Haziristan in the process. Yet, thanks in part to their North Caucasian culture, they are in a position to thrive when they do eventually turn on Persia and begin conquering westwards from Herat. This is because the North Caucasian culture has Middle Eastern heritage, giving them a 5-year incorporation timer across all of Persia and the Ottoman holdings. It won't help you too much with the Central Asian states held east of Persia, but once you do manage to get a strong foothold and a beefy enough army, nothing is going to stop you from spreading westwards into the weakening Turkic and Persian states. Then, once you're actually strong enough to take on the great powers, you'll find that you'll have just as easy a time incorporating their states as well. This is because the Caucasian Imamate also has the Chechen culture, which has the amazing European heritage attached to it. Now you can eat your way into Austria and Russia, growing exponentially with every conquest simply because the penalties for doing so are minimal, and the timer is too. I really do believe that this might be one of the most powerful primary culture combos given to a starting country in Victoria 3. Obviously, I do not believe that the Caucasian Imamate is by far the strongest wombo combo in the game. That is because Santo Domingo, a state that has to be released by Haiti, has both European heritage and African heritage, which is even stronger. Yet, because this country has to be released, it does not meet the starting criteria, so it just gets an honorable mention. Dainam is literally just a single culture, so it does not meet the combo requirements for this video. Of course, even then, due to the fact that it's Sinosphere and not a heritage, you're looking at a 10-year incorporation timer in Qing anyways, so I don't think that this culture would have cracked the top 5, but it is worth an honorable mention. The Sephardim is probably the strongest culture in the game. Literally, it is the only culture in the game that has 2 heritages, both European and Middle Eastern heritage. It is effectively the same as the Caucasian Imamate, except instead of 2 primary cultures offering up to the coverage, it is 1 single culture doing so. Sadly, despite the fact that it is in fact paired up with the Ashkenazi, if you do release Israel, you still have to release Israel to get it, and you have to have pan-nationalism to do so anyways. Yeah, obviously, the United States, much like Santo Domingo, can get the African heritage from Afro-Americans and the European heritage at the same time if they go through the motions of the Civil War. Of course, this does not count as a starting culture combination because of all the hoops that you gotta jump through to get that in the first place. That is why this country is also an honorable mention. Thank you for watching this far into the video. If you are new here, I typically do playthroughs, guides, and rants, so make sure to click the pop-up here to watch my latest guide where I help you figure out which internal security laws you should pick. Anyhow, you are all kings, and I hope you still enjoy playing Victoria 3. Make sure to give your loved ones an extra hug tonight, and always remember, Hail Hydra Cat.